Welcome to the Steroids Podcast with your host, Dan the Bodybuilder from Thailand. Boom! Boom! Let's get started here. The Steroids Podcast is brought to you by Ultimate Guide to ROIDS, 109-page ebook by Dan the Bodybuilder from Thailand. Now, for the first time in bodybuilding history, you have someone with no corporate interests and no obligation to please anyone, not walking on eggshells to not offend. Ultimate Guide to ROIDS gives you the information, the whole truth, not a full truth and a half truth, full truth. Ultimate Guide to ROIDS gives you the keys to the Lamborghini, gives you the information, and lets you decide what to do with it. It's a crime this information has been suppressed this long. Now let's get on with the podcast.
Hey everybody, Dan the Bodybuilder of Integrity here to answer your questions today. Answer your questions for the Steroids Podcast. First thing I wanted to go over was about working on your weak points when you're still coming up. So this is pretty common. It starts out because when guys are natural, they're so frustrated about their lack of muscle size and just altogether, maybe the reason that they started lifting was because they wanted to have big biceps, or they wanted to have a big chest, or they wanted to have big shoulders, and they just didn't have those. And especially genetically, it was like a weak point for them. And so they got kind of like obsessed with wanting to make that big. And then, even all the way up until they started using steroids, they still were kind of like obsessed with that and fixated on that to the detriment of worrying about what is most important, which is building up a sufficient base. And so the way that the body works is it's in control of its proportions. You can have a slight effect on your body's proportions and changing them to how you want them to be, but generally your body and your genetics are set to have certain ratios between different muscles on your body. How much they grow, whether you're arm dominant or torso dominant, etc., stuff like that, So if you're a guy who is, using steroids, and you're trying to be a bodybuilder, but you're not doing bench press with 3 plates on each side. You're not deadlifting, 4 plates on each side for reps. You're not doing squats below parallel for, a good amount of reps with 3 plates per side, etc. And you're worried about, I've got to bring up my weak points, and you're focusing on changing your weak points or the ratios between your different muscles. You're really shortchanging yourself, and you're kind of sabotaging your gains. Okay, so when you're just developing muscle mass, when you're in this initial phase of bodybuilding where you're on steroids and you're building up this base of muscle. It's called building up your base, where you get your body to be from this normal thing to this highly muscled thing, where you're looking at people and you're saying, that dude is just covered in muscle. He has thick muscle all over his body. That's called having a base. You've got to just develop a certain level of strength and proficiency in compound exercises in order to muscle your body up. And, the cards are going to fall how they're going to fall. You should use good form in the exercises. You should use good control in the exercises. But the cards are going to fall as they may. Your body is set to grow and develop in a certain way with a certain ratio of muscle size between different muscles. And if you are obsessed with, making your chest be as big as your shoulders, but you're a shoulder dominant person, and so you're doing all this extra chest work, and you just won't give it a fucking rest, and that's then going and hurting your progress, like in your bench press or something like that, because you're overtraining your chest in comparison to other muscles or something like that. Or, you're always trying to go to the gym and like work your chest more because you're irritated, and so then you're not giving enough rest between bench press workouts or something, and then you're not able to, increase your bench press. That's something that, you're getting in your own way because you're doing that. You're hurting yourself. You're hurting your progress. You're hurting your ability to, make your bodybuilding goals happen, because you're not big enough yet to be worrying so much about the proportions and everything like that. You've got to just work with your body and build up the muscle on your body. Get the muscle big. Get your body to be a big and muscled machine, and the cards are going to fall where they may. And then once you have the muscle and you've got a big base of muscle, your whole body's muscled. Now you can start making some alterations to the ratios between the muscles, bringing up some weak points, etc. But when you don't even have the muscles yet, and it's like you're already trying to it's like you got these kind of like, you got some development in your muscles, but it's not like you're like really like jacked, and you're like struggling, trying to like change the ratios between your different muscles. It's very, it's really not a direct path towards your goal of being a bodybuilder. You're just, you're kind of, just wailing away on yourself when the real goal should be that, hey, I got to get muscle on my whole body. I got to get big. Another thing would be like guys who are like, oh, my upper chest. And they're like, I got to build my upper chest. My upper chest isn't big enough. And it's like, motherfucker. Your chest isn't even big. You got to develop the whole thing, okay? You got to develop the whole thing. You're sitting here worrying about, like, oh, your weak point, your upper chest. Your entire chest is small. You got to develop the entire fucking thing, man. So it's like, it's asinine. It's asinine being worrying about this kind of shit. You need, you can only do 5 to 10 reps with 2 wheels on each side on the bench press, and maybe you don't even have the greatest form and perfect control, and you're like, oh, I've got to make my upper chest be in a bigger ratio to my lower chest. It's not even. Like, oh my God, your chest isn't even developed. You don't even have one yet. You have got to grow it before you are worrying about this kind of stuff. That's what I'm saying. I just now gave a couple examples with chest or whatever like that, but another thing will be like, somebody will be thinking about their delts or their arms, or various other body parts. You know, people have whatever body parts they're thinking about. You know, a lot of times it'll be something like the biceps too. You know, some body part that people become fixated on, and they really want that body part, and they're not even like you know, they're not even to a basic strength level yet, to a basic bigness level yet. And they're worrying about that. You got to just become big and strong overall first, man. You know, your whole body is going to grow. And it's programmed because of your mom's egg and your dad's sperm. It's programmed to grow in a certain way. So first you got to get it grown that certain way that your body is programmed to grow. When it gets big, you just learn the form, okay? Learn the form. The barbell row. Learn the form, the bench press. Standing overhead press with the locked legs. The pull-up. The curl, okay? The curl with the dumbbells or something. The squat. The deadlift, okay? And you got to get those exercises down so that you have total control and that you're strong. So that it's like, you know, you're really good at those exercises and you really know how to do those exercises. And, you know, you may not be the strongest person at the gym on those exercises, but you're really good at them. And, you know, for the most part, you can keep up with most anyone, you know, or when you go to a gym just in general, it's like okay, there may be someone stronger than you or something, right? Whatever. But it's not like, oh, well, you're just like the same as everyone else at those exercises. No, you should be way better than almost everyone at those exercises. If you're trying to get real developed, if you're trying to become a big jacked motherfucker, and you're trying to be a bodybuilder, you know, you're really trying to make progress here. On all of those basic compound exercises, you should be way better than mostly everybody that you regularly come in contact with. If you're at a powerlifting competition, obviously, you know, there's going to be people who are better than you. And, you know, there may be, you know, a couple guys better than you at the gym or something at whatever exercises. I'm not saying you have to be the best. I'm just saying that you have to be damn good at the basics before, like, dude, fundamentals. You want success? Master the fundamentals. Master the fundamentals. You want success with your steroids? You need to be hitting these fundamentals good, okay? Instead of wondering about all these little scientific shits and all these studies and all these different ways of taking them and shit and getting worried into that. You got to be doing the fundamentals. You got to be doing the fundamentals, which is taking, you know, over a gram, 1,000 milligrams of gear consistently. And, you know, and it should be testosterone if you don't have some, you know, if it's easy for you to handle testosterone, if that works for you, you know, and you're not deceived by some crap about like, oh, people just take TRT in their bodybuilders, or oh, testosterone makes you fat, because it doesn't. It makes you muscular. You know, so you're using testosterone, or you're using, if you can't for some fucking reason, okay, and this is unusual, so you're using some other stuff, and so, you know, you're consistently using over a gram of steroids per week, you know, for the most part. There's your fundamentals, okay? And now it doesn't matter, you know, all these different scientific little things and the different ways of taking them and all these other stupid ass little drugs and stuff that you can put in there. Man, it's just the fundamentals, okay? And then the other thing with the diet, you know, you're getting your fundamentals in, you know, you're getting a minimum of 250 grams of protein in every day, and, you know, more like 300 grams. And you're eating your bro meals, you know, a starch carb, a protein, a meat protein, an animal protein, and then a little vegetable serving. And you're eating these meals, getting them in you throughout the day, every day, Okay. And then you're doing your training and it's like, okay, you're becoming very good at these fundamental core free weight exercises. And you're getting to the point where mostly you're better than pretty much all the other guys at the gym, except for a very few at doing them. Okay, this is called fundamentals. And this is what you should be focusing on. Once you're like jacked and you're big and every, you know, it's like most gyms you go to, you're the biggest guy there or one of the biggest guys there, you know, pretty much always. Then it's different. You know, go work on your weak points, whatever. Go work on your weak points. Go try to do some little changes to some ratios of, you know, what muscle is bigger than the other muscle and stuff like that. But, you know, that's, you know, I don't think that everybody listening to this is at that level. You know, I don't think that probably most people listen to this. I know some guys are, but I know that there's a lot of guys who are beginners or, you know, intermediates. And they're frustrated, you know, with why don't they look muscular? You know, why aren't they one of these guys? You know, they think they're putting in the work, and they're like, you know, why do I still kind of look like a normal guy at the gym? Why don't I look like one of these dudes that is like not a normal guy at the gym and turning heads with your performance, turning heads with you know what you look like. You know, you look like a dude who is jacked as fuck. Well, you have got to stick to the fundamentals, and you've got, don't get distracted with all this other stuff, you know, focusing on, you know, my weak points and getting it even and making everything even. But you're not even big yet. Okay? So remember the fundamentals. Starting this podcast off, trying to help you guys here. This is why I'm telling you this. Because this is a very common psychological sticking points that are holding some of you guys back. So starting this episode off here with talking about that, so that you can, you know, use that information to help you to make gains and get to your goal, because this would be one of the things that is really holding a lot of guys back. You know, there's so much information, and if you complicate things too much and you get real complicated and you're focusing on all these details, that's going to fuck you up. It's going to fuck you up. You need to be a master at the basics, the fundamentals. All right? When you've mastered those, and it's like, shit, you are a master of the basics. You are a master of the fundamentals. You're going to be in a pretty damn good position, man. And you're going to be feeling pretty good about where you're at. And then, you know, you're going to know because when you go to gyms, you're going to know, like, not very many people look like me. Not very many people can perform like me. And at that point, then, you know, start working on some details more. Start doing some more, like, detailed stuff with your hormone and steroid use and stuff. But before that, you know, you should really be focusing on the fundamentals in order to get where you want to go and in order to have the success that you want. Okay. Other thing I wanted to mention real quick was delayed gratification. So, this is just a principle that whatever you want, that is when there's going to be pain involved. Okay, there's going to be pain involved in reaching your goals, bodybuilding or whatever else you want in your life, and whatever you're looking to get out of your life. Because if you're looking at building anything or developing anything or acquiring anything that's worth acquiring, that, you know, it's going to require you to go through being uncomfortable, being in pain, having some not good times, not enjoying yourself, okay? In order to get that thing. And the reason why that thing is valuable is because, and the reason why not everyone has it is because you have to go through this shit, the shitty part, okay? So delayed gratification and being okay with that is a very essential psychological state that you must possess in order to get what you want. You have to be able to say, okay, I'm going to put myself through something not fun right now. I'm going to do this stuff that doesn't feel good right now, because if I delay feeling good, having pleasure, having fun, and go through this uncomfortable time, then there's this thing that I'm going to get at the end, and it's going to be awesome. The gratified state. Okay? I'm just telling you, whatever you want in your life, get comfortable with this principle, delayed gratification, where you're gonna go through some shit, and you know, that's some uncomfortable times. And that's the only way that you're gonna separate yourself, man. It's the only way you're gonna separate yourself from, you know, Joe Schmo shithead. Okay? I've been getting a lot of questions about how to sleep better on steroids, because you know what? Steroids affect your sleep. You know, so what they do is, when you're on steroids, they affect your resting adrenaline levels. So, you know, you could talk about being like jacked up on steroids or wired on steroids. And if you've used certain steroids, like you've used a lot of Test, you've used Tren, you've used D-Ball, you've used Anadrol, Superdrol, you're going to know what I'm talking about when I say jacked up on steroids. Like, because it's very stimulating, okay? And they can actually make you shake a little bit or vibrate a little bit. And the reason why that's happening, you know, is because your central nervous system is jacked up. You know, your resting adrenaline level, the amount of adrenaline that you have in your bloodstream, is higher when you're at rest, when you're doing nothing, than it would be if you were natural. This is an effect of steroids. And so this is why guys have trouble sleeping on steroids, is because they've got this adrenaline going through their blood when they're even resting. They've got a higher amount of adrenaline going through their blood when they're doing nothing, which makes it harder to sleep. So there's a couple things that help with that, okay? One is just getting used to them. So when you first get on the steroids, when you first get on the heavy steroids, or like when you first up the dose of Test, you know, to like over 1,000 milligrams, or when you start taking Trenbolone, you know, there's a certain amount of stimulation that, and, you know, broken sleep that you're going to have to put up with, where it takes about between 2 weeks to a month of adaptation for your body to be like, okay, you know, now my receptors are a little bit like my receptors of stimulation for my nervous system are a little bit desensitized now, so I feel a little bit more normal. I don't feel so freaking wired constantly, okay? So that's going to be the first thing, is you're going to have to put up with it for a couple weeks as that happens. But the other, a couple things that will help though with sleeping is to take your shots in the morning. When you first wake up in the morning, make that your ritual. You take your shots in the morning. If you're taking any pills like D-bol or Anadrol or Superdrol that are very stimulatory, or some guys get it from Anavar and Winstrol too. Don't take them, within 6 hours of when you're going to go to sleep. You should want to be taking most of your steroids. Take your shots in the morning. Always take your shots in the morning, first thing when you wake up. And if you're having trouble sleeping, cut your pills so that you're not, cut it off is what I mean, so that you're not taking them, anywhere near when you're going to be sleeping. All right, well, that's going to help you a lot. Another thing is to, if at all possible, train before 6 p.m. When you train later at night, it releases, and if you're having trouble sleeping, if you don't have trouble sleeping, you don't need to train before 6 p.m. This is only for guys who have trouble sleeping, okay? So for these guys that are having that, don't train at night, because when you train at night, it really jacks you up for a long time afterwards. And, to go with that too, don't train legs at night. Don't squat at night, because, man, when you do that shit, it is like impossible to sleep. If you've done that really like after 6 p.m. or so, your system is so jacked up, your nervous system is so jacked up for the rest of the night that it is like impossible to sleep, okay? So those are my tips for you guys that are having trouble sleeping on steroids. The main thing is to, try and shift taking the steroids in the morning, and then don't train late at night, and certainly do not do legs squatting late at night, all right? All right. Next, we're going to get on to a question here. The next question is from Veli. Veli asks, "Hey, Dan, I always follow your podcast. Quick little question. What would be the best oral and injectable steroid to keep me shut down as a form of birth control, LOL? I don't want to get my girl pregnant and she's on the pill. If she's off the pill, I'm on Trenbolone 400 per week, test at 1,000 milligrams a week, and I usually either Equipoise 900 or Masteron 900. Damn, you must be very horny if you're taking Masteron 900. And orals. Always D-bol, Anadrol, Superdrol. I never go off orals." Damn, you are a guy who is really pushing it, aren't you? You think that's enough to keep me shut down? I don't want to have a kid. I know nothing is 100%. Or I was thinking about Mint also. Well, yeah, Mint is prescribed as male birth control, but none of the steroids completely work as male birth control. They help, they certainly help, but don't be firing off cum loads into women, into their vaginas, okay? Don't be squirting semen into there, okay? You got to pull out. Okay? If you're taking steroids and you're pulling out and the girl is not on birth control, it's actually a pretty damn effective method of not having a baby. Being on steroids and pulling out and seriously pulling out, not squirting in there. Cause you can't be doing this thing where you're like, oh, well, I kind of pulled out. Like you have to fucking know, you did not squirt any semen inside the woman. And if you're doing that and you're taking steroids consistently, like the way you're doing it, it's very unusual for someone to get a woman pregnant. But if you're spraying semen into your woman's vagina, and you're on steroids, man, you're almost guaranteed to get these women pregnant. Okay, there are so many stories of, man, I'm on Trenbolone, you know, my balls are totally shrunk, you know. So many guys, you know, have these stories saying these kind of things. And, you know, woman got pregnant. You know, I had blah, 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 blah kid. You know, I made my entire family on Tren, you know. You know, there's so many guys that have these stories. So, do not come inside of women and think that your steroids, no matter what steroids you're using, no matter if you're taking Tren, Ment, whatever, is going to make you infertile and make you firing blanks, because it doesn't. Okay. And one thing I can tell you even why is that simply the injected testosterone has an effect on the Leydig cells in your testicles that create sperm, where it stimulates them to create sperm. Okay. So while it is shutting down your own natural response, there is a bit of an actual artificial response simply because of the injected testosterone actually getting into the tissue of your testicles and then turning these cells on a little bit that produce the sperm. You know, yet you got billions of sperm going on being produced, and you know, there's always gonna be some, no matter how many steroids you're on, there's always gonna be some sperm. And if you're shooting off, you know, coming into women who are not on birth control, you're going to get them pregnant. Okay, bottom line. So steroids and pull out works really well. Next question. This one's from Dennis. Huge fan of the podcast. Keep it going. With the change of the size game, with Dorian Yates in front as the pioneer back in the 90s, came with the ability to use AIs. So it's kind of confusing the way it's written. But so basically he's asking, was the change of size, starting with Dorian Yates of these pro bodybuilders, is AIs like Arimidex, Exemestane, Letrozole responsible for that? He says, I'm thinking with the ability to use greater amounts of testosterone to hold the mass of muscle. All the best. You know, in the early 90s, that is when they started using powerful AIs and really relying on them, like Arimidex, Letrozole, Exemestane. Before that, they weren't really. They were pretty much just using Nolvadex. So it was a factor. You're right. It was a factor. But you know, some guys were already using huge amounts of testosterone. Not everybody aromatizes or creates estrogen out of testosterone. There are guys that can take thousands of milligrams per week of testosterone and not have any estrogen response from it. And then there are other guys, you know, that can't take, you know, 500 milligrams without having a massive estrogen response. It's very, very genetically variant from person to person, how much estrogen they create out of testosterone. And so there were already guys using a lot of testosterone, okay? But you're right in that the early 90s is when high testosterone use became really prevalent, which definitely had a major effect, you know, in increasing the size of bodybuilders. But, you know, really what you see where there was this jump, you know, from where Arnold Schwarzenegger, Lee Haney, Franco Columbo, whatever, you know, these bodybuilders that were pre-Dorian Yates. And then you see Dorian Yates and you're like, you know, something happened. And then ever since then, all the bodybuilders look way different. They look more like refrigerators. They look way bigger. the texture of their body looks different. What you're seeing there, the primary thing that you're seeing is use of insulin and use of large amounts of insulin, injectable insulin. That's the main thing that changed, okay? They were already using growth hormone back in the 70s. They were using injected, they would, dead people, they were taking the pituitary glands from dead people and grinding them up, not the bodybuilder, but there was a medication called Hormone that was this, that the bodybuilders were taking. And so it was the ground up pituitary glands of dead people, a pituitary extract. The pituitary is what makes the growth hormone in the human body. And then, taking that extract and injecting it, the bodybuilders. And some of them were actually even doing it with monkeys. So there was also a monkey version where it was monkey growth hormone extract. And bodybuilders were using that, okay, all the way back in the 70s. In the 80s, that's when recombinant growth hormone use started, which is the growth hormone we have today, which is rDNA growth hormone, bioidentical growth hormone that is very pure and made by rDNA technology, which is where E. coli bacteria is genetically modified using viruses to modify the genetics of the E. coli bacteria to make it so that instead of producing more E. coli as its reproductive product, the E. coli bacteria then produces human growth hormone because it's been genetically engineered. That's the kind of growth hormone we have now. So growth hormone was already being used. Steroids were already being used at very high dosages. Testosterone was being used, not by everyone, but by some people at very high dosages. But what really made that difference, where Dorian Yates came back one year and he was a different bodybuilder, and then after that everybody was kind of playing catch up, and then a couple of years later everybody got big like that, and everybody started getting big stomachs where no one had a big stomach before. There was no bodybuilder who had a big stomach, and then all of a sudden all the bodybuilders have big stomachs. That started because Dorian Yates discovered, whoa, I can combine insulin with my steroids and use a lot of insulin. And this completely changes the size of the bodybuilder. Insulin makes people, it really changes the size of the bodybuilder. And it also does a bunch of really, disgusting stuff to the bodybuilder, It really promotes diabetes. It's very unsafe. Taking insulin decreases your insulin sensitivity over time, so that you're more immune to the effects of insulin. It grows. It grows. It interacts with the growth hormone at the huge dosages, and grows things. So you get the growth hormone guts. A lot of problems, a lot of problems when guys mix the insulin with the growth hormone and steroids. It makes them astronomically bigger, okay? It makes them astronomically bigger. But, looking at modern day bodybuilding or Dorian Yates era forward bodybuilding and comparing it with before Dorian Yates bodybuilding, before him, you have these bodybuilders that the average person who's not a bodybuilder, looks at, those early bodybuilding physiques from the 70s, from the 80s, and you look at that and you say, damn, that looks fucking amazing. I want to look like that, even if you're not a bodybuilder, even if you don't go to the gym. You say like, that dude is jacked and he looks fucking sick. I want to have a body like that. But then once you added the insulin in there and you get that, what Dorian Yates started and, now what is going on today, is you get these really disgusting looking bodies that are much bigger, but are it's incredible. It's incredible, the size, but the texture, the shape, and the incredible size and the proportions with the enlarged guts and everything, enlarged heads. It's just disgusting, and no one who's not a bodybuilder looks at that and says like, wow, that's a perfect body, I want to look like that. Everybody say, what the fuck? What the fuck is this drugged out freak? So looking at that, you can see that's what insulin does, okay? So, are we better off doing bodybuilding without insulin? Yeah, we certainly are. Can you get way, way bigger if you use insulin? Yes. Is the average person going to want to look like you if you use a lot of insulin? No. If you just use steroids and growth hormone, you can use a lot of those. And the average person is going to look at you and think, damn, I want to look like that. Especially if you keep the growth hormone at 5 IUs or less per day, okay? And you can use unlimited steroids, okay? But, that's where you're getting the kind of body where the average person who's not a bodybuilder, is looking at you and saying, you got a perfect body, you're jacked as hell, and you look sick, I want to be like that. Once you start adding insulin and then, high dosages of growth hormone, more than 5 IUs a day, consistently, that's where you start creating these morphed, very weird looking bodies that are only appreciated by other bodybuilders. All right, next question. Question for the podcast. I'm taking testosterone, 350 milligrams, 3 times per week with Tren, 200 milligrams 3 times per week. So he's taking about 1,000 milligrams total of testosterone a week and 600 milligrams total of Tren a week. And he's taking Dianabol 20 milligrams per day. His question is, he has Pramipexole but not Cabergoline. Will that work, or do I need to get some Cabergoline? What would you recommend for me on cycle for AIs? Pramipexole will work. Pramipexole does the same thing as Cabergoline. It's, so for example, Arimidex and Letrozole do the same thing. They both decrease estrogen, okay? So Pramipexole and Cabergoline both also do the same thing. They decrease prolactin, okay? But, Cabergoline is much more pleasant to use, for one thing, and it's also a lot easier to use. So if you take Pramipexole at the dosage that's needed, which is 0.5 milligram to 1 milligram per day in order to control prolactin side effects. If you just start taking that one day, you're going to get really sick and you're going to be throwing up, actually. You have to start actually with Pramipexole with 1/10 of a milligram per day, and then every 2 days increase it another 1/10 of a milligram until you get up to 0.5 milligrams. And then once you're at 0.5 milligrams, you can jump between like 0.5 to 0.75 and 1 milligram, and it's no big deal. But going from taking none up to taking 0.5 milligram a day is a very sensitive process. Where you will be seriously sick if you don't do that really careful taper up with the Pramipexole. And I mean that. I really mean it when I say that. It's not a fun thing to go through. I've done it. I've done it. I've been through the sickness. So, I mean, I remember the first time I did do it, I took a 0.5 milligram, and, you know, I didn't know that was going to happen. I was in a meeting with some kind of administrator thing that I was meeting with an administrator of, you know, whatever I was doing at the time, and I had to say, I gotta go to the bathroom. I feel sick, and then, you know, I was going to the bathroom for a half hour, and then I come back, you know, I'm like white as a ghost. I'm like, I gotta go home, and then I'm throwing up for about 3 hours, and then for about the next 24 hours, I'm just, you know, sleeping or throwing up. Not fun. But you don't have to go through any of that with Cabergoline. And that's why Cabergoline is so much better, is that there's none of these sickness effects associated with it. You can go right into taking it, and there's no issues. And it's actually even better. It works better. It's more effective. Pramipexole needs to be taken every day. It has a short active life. And because of that, it's not as effective at like a flat line, really taking down the prolactin from DECA or Trenbolone. But Cabergoline only needs to be taken twice or 3 times a week. It's a very long-acting tablet. So it just has a more steady, totally taking care of the prolactin problem. So it's so much easier to take, and then it's also more effective and doesn't cause those wretched side effects that starting out on Pramipexole can if you're not very careful with it. So that's why, you know, Cabergoline is definitely, you know, you hear, you know, which one of the dopamine agonists, the antiprolactins, should I be taking? Prolactin and dopamine are counterbalancing hormones, so that's why they're, you know, a dopamine agonist also means anti-prolactin. It's the same thing. So anyways, that's why you hear so much, you know, why is the preference so strong with everyone for Cabergoline? And that's why. All right, next question is from Bob. No, this one's from Dawson. No. Okay, he says, okay. Confusing. 2 questions for the podcast. Is Tren the best pound-for-pound muscle-building steroid there is? I remember you talking about Tren abusers. How can you tell if someone abuses Tren? You know what? Tren is very good muscle-building steroid. You know, it's hard to say, you know, is Tren the best pound-for-pound muscle-building steroid? You know, I don't know if I would say that. It definitely builds muscle tissue, and it's definitely extremely effective. Like, testosterone, Trenbolone, and Dianabol, those are probably the 3 best muscle building steroids there are. Those 3, you know, those are probably the best. And it's hard to say, you know, which one is the best, but one of those 3, you know, if you experiment with one of those 3 or you use all of those 3, you know, it's gonna work. So, you know, that's what you said you're using. Or no, the last guy was using it. So you should be like the last guy from the last question and use the testosterone, Trenbolone, and D-ball. You know, you said, how can you tell a Tren abuser? The eyes. It increases the resting adrenaline level very, very dramatically. And the eyes are way too intense. Way overly intense in Tren abusers. and it doesn't look right. It looks like they're almost not looking at you. It's almost as if they're not looking at you when they're looking at you. If you catch my drift, you'll know when you see it. Look at pictures of Phil Heath at the Mr. Olympia concert or contests, and look at what his eyes look like. His eyes do not look normal, and that is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. These eyes that it's like they're looking at you, but they're almost like looking off into the distance or something like that. Very strange looking eyeballs. Looks like they way overdosed on coffee or something like that, That's what a Tren abuser looks like. You can really tell from the eyes, and just way overly intense, inappropriately intense for the situation. Okay, next question is from Bob, and he asks, my question for the podcast. My last cycle was 200 milligrams testcypionate and 1,000 milligrams nandrolone phenylpropionate, so fast-acting DECA, for 16 weeks. I had a terrific recomp and performance boost with what looked like no water retention. I plan to use what I have on hand for my next cycle, so it'll be 700 milligrams testosterone propionate and 500 milligrams Masteron propionate for 16 weeks. The goal is similar, recomp and go from there. What differences do you think What differences do you think I will notice between these two cycles? Do you think there will be any increase in water retention? I've never taken testosterone above a TRT dosage before, and just want to keep that vascular look. So this time you're going to be you've been using lower testosterone before. You used 200 testosterone, 1,000 NPP nandrolone, and that worked out good for you. You said you didn't get water retention, but now this time you're using up to 700 milligrams of testosterone propionate with 500 milligrams of Masteron propionate. It's going to be roughly comparable. Your cycles as far as the body recomposition effect. 700 milligrams of testosterone propionate is very similar in its firepower and what it can do for you, what it can do for your bodybuilding, as 1,000 milligrams of nandrolone phenylpropionate (NPP). So you have those there, and then you have the Masteron in this cycle, and the Masteron it does increase your strength. It has a strength boosting effect because it increases your brain's ability to activate your muscle fibers. It's a neurological effect, so it kicks in basically as soon as you start taking the Masteron. Within 2 weeks you're just a bit stronger, and you'll maintain that for the cycle. There are some slight fat burning properties with Masteron, but with Masteron, what you notice when you go on it is I'm sweating. I've got a thick oil slick on the top of my skin. It's not normal oil. It's very thick oil. And if I accidentally touch something, I'll leave an oil mark on that. Like I've been working on cars on an engine or something like that. Very bizarre. Very bizarre. Other thing you're going to notice is that your sex drive is your mental sex drive is extremely high. Thinking about sex, frequency of thinking about sex, desiring sex, very high. Really, it's very interesting to experience that, actually. Then Masteron can definitely be an acne promoter, and also prostate. So Masteron has an affinity for the prostate and making that thing swell up. So if you're especially because you've got the higher testosterone now and you've never ran testosterone above TRT dose. So when estrogen gets high and that mixes with dihydrotestosterone, or that mixes with something like Masteron in the prostate, it causes the prostate to swell. So if you get that side effect where you're having to urinate really frequently, or when you do urinate, you kind of have to like push it out, and it's a weak stream. The first thing you're going to want to do is take AI and make sure that you get that estrogen down, because that's what's kind of activating the ability of the Masteron and the dihydrotestosterone to make your prostate swell up like that. And if that doesn't work, if you're not able to get it under control, then you would need to bring the Masteron dosage down. So that's what I would look forward to with the Masteron. Masteron also doesn't make you bigger at all. So it does densify you, make you denser, bring the skin's water retention down, kind of bring everything's muscle or water retention down. So maybe even your muscles a little bit. So maybe even a tiny bit less volume, but more density, hardness in the muscles. But it's not something like a Winstrol, which, Winstrol gives you Winstrol does bring the water retention down in the skin, but it also volumizes your muscles and makes your muscles look even bigger, being on Winstrol. Masteron doesn't do that. Masteron, it has no increase in size at all when you take it. But it does have a hardening effect. Yes, definitely. A density effect for sure. Terror Squad asks, hey, what's your opinion on HGH Fragment? Does it work for fat burning? People claim it's 12 times as potent as HGH. Okay, I can tell you right now, it's not 12 times as potent as HGH for fat burning. But, from people that do use the HGH Fragment, there's been a lot of anecdotal reports of it working well. Of it working well for fat burning. But this is not something that is this is not something that professionals are using for the most part. There may be a professional here or there who's using it, but this is an experimental product. It's an experimental chemical. This is not something that's regularly being used. People are having, the same results all across the board with it. So if you use that, these peptides, like HGH Fragment, or whatever other, peptides with these different crazy names, CJC, DAC, GHRP, all this stuff. It's just experimental stuff. It's not the good stuff, okay? What the good stuff is, the stuff that really freaking works, and there's no doubt about it. And man, it works in a week. Okay? It doesn't take you don't have to be on it for months before you start noticing effects. No. Or in order to benefit from it, you got to be on it for months. No. In order to benefit from human growth hormone, pharmaceutical grade human growth hormone, you've only got to use 2 or 3 IUs for a week. And there's a difference in your physique, okay? There's a difference in your physique. It's helping you build muscle. It's helping you burn fat in 1 week's time, okay? So if you want to really, use the peptide, use the stuff that freaking works, okay? And, anybody who's saying that this other stuff, is better than it, that's not true. Pharmaceutical grade growth hormone, the real pharmaceutical grade growth hormone. It's really great stuff. And none of these other peptides can compare to it. And it works fast. And it doesn't need to be used for a long time in order to get the results from it. It's very fast acting, immediate effects. Okay. Next question is from Jay. Hey, currently running 875 DECA, 875 testosterone.
looking to drop some body fat, so I'm in a slight deficit. Does it make sense to keep my dosages that high if I'm not going to gain size? I originally got the Deca to put on more size, but advised myself against getting more fluffy. Any insight would be appreciated. Thanks, bro. Yeah, you should keep the dosage where it is. If that's the dosage that you're comfortable with going into your cycle, 875, test and Deca. If you go onto some kind of low dosage steroid use for your cutting, it's not fun. It's not fun at all, because you will become very flat. What that means is that the fuel storage in your muscles is going to go way down, and your strength is going to go way down, and your ability to really feel like you're able to work hard and for a long time in the gym is going to go way down. Okay? Your muscles are going to look like they went into hibernation mode. If you cut that dosage in half, you probably wouldn't really lose much muscle. But I can tell you that the process of cutting is going to be much more painful, much more unpleasant, much more not fun. And even like your chances of like injury and stuff like that are going to be higher. Being on a good dosage of steroids, good enough dosage that you feel when you're cutting, that you feel like, I feel like I'm on freaking steroids, okay? And then you start cutting, then you feel nice and strong when you're cutting. You can get through your workouts good. You have a lot of energy in your workouts. You don't get this withered away thing or muscles going into hibernation mode, feeling like, what the hell happened here? Where you may not have actually lost much muscle tissue, but while you're dieting, you look like you fucking lost muscle tissue. But really it just has to wait until you're back on another cycle, a bigger cycle or something like that. That's what, for guys that are like cutting on 500 test or something, that's what that would happen to them if they were normally guys who were, using normal cycles. And then they decided, well, I'm just going to use something small like 250 test or 500 test. I want to say 500 if you're, at least in intermediate bodybuilder. Everything works better when you're on a good cycle. When you're on a strong cycle, everything works better. All the pathways, all the metabolic pathways that affect your nutrient partitioning, that affect muscle preservation, strength preservation, fat loss, everything's going to work better when you've got a nice anabolic cycle going on. So don't lower the dosages. Keep them the way you got them. All right. And the last question for today is from Isaac. Yo, Dan, love the podcast, man. Quick question, if you get around to seeing this. Wanted to ask someone who I think is knowledgeable. Thanks, bro. Have you heard of anyone getting like an anxiety attack from Anavar? Felt amazing on it with testosterone for 2 weeks in. But then I had what felt like an anxiety attack after an Anavar dose. I stopped taking it and it's been over a day now since last dose. I still feel okay if I'm busy or concentrating on something else. My heart rate's still a little elevated. Anxiety gets worse if I think about it too much, which usually leads to some shaky hands and nervousness. Wondering if you have any advice. I don't have any pre-existing conditions, and I've used Anavar before with zero issues. Thanks. Yeah, you know what? This is going to be a shocker because this is normally not what you hear about Anavar. But Anavar has significant mental effects. You know what? I get so many, because, I get, so many people asking me questions about steroids all the time. talking to me about steroids. So I have this huge, in addition to, my life and talking to people, as I've used steroids, talking to people in the gym, my personal friends, and I have this huge pool or sample of, internet people that, are counseling with me or send me emails, whatever, social media message about what's going on with them. And you guys having some mental effects from Anavar, negative mental effects, headaches, moodiness, or what some guys describe as bitchiness, some outbursts, irritability, anxiety from Anavar. Very common, happening to a lot of people. So you are not alone at all with that. The anxiety attack thing that you said you experienced, that's a little intense there. So that would definitely be on the more extreme side of what is common. Probably I haven't exactly heard that one before, but as far as getting anxiety, as far as having irritability, headaches, mood swings from Anavar, this is not out of the ordinary. This is not out of the norm. For some reason, it's not talked about. It's not something that's normally talked about with Anavar. Normally, Anavar is known as or thought of as this steroid that has no side effects whatsoever. And, for the most part, it is. For the most part, Anavar is not something you notice much when you take it. It's not even something you notice much in the gym, really, unless you're taking 80 milligrams, 100 milligrams a day. It increases your strength to take Anavar. Does it really do much else that's really really noticeable? Not really. It's a very mild steroid as far as most of the effects. But these mental effects are definitely real. And I can tell you that me personally, I do get some, not anxiety, but I get a bit of irritableness and some headaches from it. Unusual. I really prefer Winstrol. Winstrol is so much more powerful than Anavar. It does everything that Anavar does, but it does it so much better. Makes you stronger, makes you harder, makes you more vascular. It gets rid of more water retention in your skin. And I've never had any kind of anxiety or bad mental effects from Winstrol. Winstrol's great. For all you guys running Anavar, thinking about running Anavar or having problems running Anavar, highly recommend to just swap that out with Winstrol, which is much cheaper, much more effective, and milligram per milligram wipes out what Anavar can do for you. All right, so thanks for asking that question. If you guys want to get on the phone with me and do a 1-hour phone call consultation, you can send me an email at steroidspodcast@gmail.com. It's $59 for the hour, and we can go over whatever you need to talk about. Your cycles, planning your cycles, your side effects, training, diet, whatever you need to go over. And we can get on the phone and you can talk to me. So send me an email, 1 hour, $59, steroidspodcast@gmail.com to ask about that. And then the other program that I do is the 1 month texting on WhatsApp, where, again, you can ask me questions about diet, training, steroids, side effects, your cycle. I'm there for you, whatever you need. And you can ask me as many questions as you need every day. You don't have to wait for me to get back to you before you answer more questions or before you ask more questions. You can load me up And I'll always get back to you and answer everything within 24 hours or less. And that one's $99 for a month. And so same thing, if you want to get on the texting program with me, send me an email, steroidspodcast@gmail.com, and we can do that. I've been on the phone with tons of you guys, listeners from the Steroids podcast, and I always like it. You guys are cool guys. I like talking to you guys on the phone. So I've had a lot of great interactions talking with a ton of you guys who are listeners on the phone. It's cool. You guys, it's pretty sweet, you know, listening to the podcast, and then we talk on the phone. It's cool. You guys are cool guys. It's good shit. Other thing is either go to steroidspodcast.com, and if you stay on any one page there for about 15 seconds, a pop-up will come up where you can sign up to be on the VIP email list, so that if I get deleted from social media, I have your email address and your first name. That's what that is. So I can contact you to let you know, how to find the podcast or whatever, if something happens. And then the other thing is, if you have an iPhone, if you could go to the Apple Podcast app and find the Steroids podcast on iTunes, Apple Podcasts app, and leave a 5-star review for the Steroids podcast. It helps it grow. This is really important and very helpful thing that you can do to help me out if you enjoy the podcast, to help it grow. So I hope you guys had a great time listening to the podcast today, and I'll talk to you again soon.
If you would like your questions to be answered on the Steroids podcast, go to steroidspodcast.com and leave a comment with your questions, or email or private message steroidspodcast@gmail.com or steroidspodcast on Instagram. Until next time.